So we hired our first salesperson, Adam Schmidt, who's now Vice President of Business Development. He's actually a partner in the company today. He helped me co-found ProFab Alliance. And so I brought him on. The motivation for our first salesman was purely, we've hired all these people and I don't want to lay them off. I don't want to do that to them. I want to keep this thing going the way it's going. We've got to feed this fire.
Welcome to episode 3 of the ProFab Alliance podcast. If you've been following along, we've been talking to Matthew Nix about the 100x journey of Nix companies, growing a 100-year-old company 100 times in 20 years. So the last episode we left off, we talked about Matthew coming full-time into the business, and then some of the big breaks that they had that kind of launched the company to where it is today. And the first big one that's in their kind of wheelhouse now, which was their core business. Let's talk about some of the struggles and maybe not just the struggles, but some of the learning things that you guys experienced. So you just landed this contract that doubled your business overnight. Yeah. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, there was a couple of things. One really important one that I want to talk about that could have changed the whole trajectory of our company. But before we get to that, I want to back up and make one point about that. So in the last episode, we talked about how for 6 years, I was grinding and fighting and scraping and nothing on the surface was really happening. We got a couple big breaks, and particularly this modular building contract where we were fabricating modular buildings, very much part of our core business today. But the point I want to make about that is so many people are looking for opportunities or looking for this, and it really just passes them by. And so I think you got to put in the work and get ready, but you also have to seize the opportunity when it's there. And it would have been so easy to say, well, I only want to build one of them. I don't want to build 12. And we don't have a forklift to do this. We don't have the manpower to do this. And there was a lot of I had a lot of outs. And I talked to my team about this all the time today. I said, it's one thing to get out over your skis and do things you shouldn't do. We don't want to do that. And the bigger you get, the more conscientious you need to be about that. But it's a whole other thing to stop at the first obstacle. And I think too often people get to the first obstacle and they stop, And what I tend to do is I get to that first obstacle and I start iterating and I screw it up and I fix it and I screw it up and fix it again. And meanwhile, I get it fixed and I'm moving forward before the other guy ever got started, And I think that's important to remember. I love the analogy or the scene would be like on the movie Dumb and Dumber that everybody's seen. And at the end, they're walking down the road and all the pretty girls pull up in the bus, and they said, we're looking for a couple of oil boys to come with us on our trip, and then they're like, well, there's a town that way, and they drive off, opportunity just passed them right by. And I think that's a good analogy for what I'm talking about. And so you got to seize it when the opportunity's there. And that opportunity to build these modular buildings doesn't come around again, the next time. So that was point number one. So back to your question about what we learned from it. The biggest one was we had 1 or 2 team members at the time. We had to add 5 or 6 immediately to do this work. We also had to run a second shift because we still had to do all the legacy business on first shift. And so my brother joined the business by this time, Adam Nix, who's now Vice President of Operations. He came in and he actually lived with me during that time, and we took turns running the night shift. So we did 4 10s on night shift. So we would every other day we would work a double shift, and then we got a night off and go do it all over again. And so in order to do that, we had to hire folks. We'd never really hired like that before. And of course, buy equipment too, but the hiring part was the big challenge. You can imagine a small business no one's heard of in the middle of nowhere that's trying to staff up quickly. You can imagine the applicants that we got. I mean, it was rough back in the day. And if you could fog a windshield, and you could weld, we would hire you. And so very quickly, we had a pretty rough working environment. Quality control was a big problem. There were just issues that we were dealing with, personnel issues, people stealing from us, and just safety issues really. And so we were headed down a path that a lot of businesses go down, and that's to grow or just to meet demand. Maybe you didn't even want to grow, but the demand organically is just happening, and you're trying to fulfill the demand. And so you take shortcuts, and you hire people that you shouldn't have hired. You tolerate things you shouldn't have tolerated. I think anyone listening, if they're being honest, has dealt with this, and we still do today. But I have the blessing of remembering what that was like. And so there was a watershed moment where I was sitting in my office one night, like sulking, and my brother came in and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I guess we're just going to have to tolerate a certain amount of bullshit, or we're never going to be able to hire anybody." And he said, "Absolutely not." He put me in my place. He said, "We're not lowering our standards just, to have workers here. We're going to stick to our values, and we're not going to lower our standards." And he really smacked me upside the head when I needed it. And that was, so, we didn't just go fire everybody the next day, but that was the encouragement I needed to draw a line in the sand and say, this is how we're going to do it. And if you don't like that, you can go work somewhere else, which can sound really harsh or whatever. But ironically, today, we have one of the best cultures in the whole industry, I would argue, and that people are flocking to work at our business because of that. And so, but to get to there, you have to start with some boundaries and some ground rules. And so that was a huge tipping point for us, inflection point that, we made a conscious decision that, yes, we want to grow. Yes, we're going to be aggressive, but not at the expense of not having quality people and adhering to our values. And so that was a really, really important moment for us.
So I think that's a huge takeaway, and I know that's why you said you put an emphasis on there, because that's not just even in the fabrication industry. That's any business that is going from 1, 2, 3 employees, family employees, or whatever, to hiring people outside of your family fast, or trying to grow and getting the right talent in place. But everybody has to be on the right. They all have to be like working towards the same goal. And I think the fact that Adam was able to slap you a little bit and get you to draw that line, I think other people can learn about that. They can learn that, like, it's okay to say, these are the type of people we want to hire. They're going to fit in, because if you have the right people that fit into your culture, then you're all going to work better together. You're going to like each other, and you're going to work better towards that goal. So I think that is a huge takeaway. So you're doing this modular building project. Is there any other thing, whether it's, you're just wrapping it up and what that did for the business, or was there anything else going on during that was significant into the growth of Nix's?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, it brought a lot of revenue in, and it was profitable work. And there's things, when you take on a large project or you scale your business, there's risks associated with that. The human risk component, I think we've appropriately addressed here, but then there's the performance risk of actually performing the work, and there's the cash flow risk. And I think sometimes people associate those second two together, but they're not. If you don't perform, you might have a cash flow risk, but you could perform and also have a cash flow risk. So they're separate issues. For example, we were doing $500,000 in revenue. We took on a $500,000 job. Well, you can't possibly cash flow all of the outlay of material and labor that you need to do a job. People too often don't think through that aspect of it. We could have landed this great profitable job and went bankrupt in the process, because you're not going to be able to collect your payment till the end if you don't manage it right. So first and foremost, I didn't have enough credit with the steel supplier, so had to go to them, get the credit limit raised. Fortunately, have 100 years of they are a multi-generation family business as well, which is really cool. They're massive, national company now, but so much history going back. Was able to go to them, get our credit limit raised, no questions asked. That helped, but also negotiated payment terms with the customer. Payment terms we still use to this day. That they provided a down payment up front, and that we billed them as we went. And those two things combined allowed us to generate positive cash flow, because it's not enough to make money on paper. You have to have the cash as well. And so the job was profitable, cash flow was coming in. That really started to fuel the growth. We can buy newer equipment, more equipment. We can hire people. And so that's fueling the growth. Meanwhile, I know this contract's going to come to an end. We were lucky enough to actually land a second contract that was similar to that. But during the second one. So we had about a 2-year run rate here of this work. But I knew that that contract was coming to an end, and there were no large jobs after that one. So we hired our first salesperson, Adam Schmidt, who's now Vice President of Business Development. He's actually a partner in the company today. He helped me co-found the ProFab Alliance, and so he's salaried employee number one. I brought him on. The motivation for our first salesman was purely, we've hired all these people, and I don't want to lay them off. I don't want to do that to them, and I want to keep this thing going the way it's going. We've got to feed this fire. And so that was purely the motivation for the first salesperson. And today, that motivation to not lay people off is still a tremendous driver of our business development efforts. You know, we've never done that. That's something that we take a lot of pride in, and that we really feel a sense of obligation to make sure all of our team members, you know, get their 40 hours in. So yeah, that was a big part of the journey for us.
I'm going to go back a little bit, and then I want to go into you hired your first salesperson, and you. I'm assuming he did something to keep it going a little bit, and you can talk about whether it was like something that you guys went out and got. But before that, I just want to know. You talked about negotiating payment terms and things like that. I think for a lot of business owners, especially in the fabricating business, probably for any industry really, finding that customer that's the right fit,
Yep.
that helped you launch. I'm going to assume that was actually a pretty good customer that you got.
Wonderful customer.
They understood that you were biting off maybe a little more than you could chew as you're trying to learn it. They helped you with, let you do your payment terms the way you did. Can you talk about that? Like, have you ever reflected on that, on how important it is to get the right customer?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they could have bankrupted us, and having the right customer is so important. People, I see too many business owners, business leaders that are just working and working and working and never have any cash to show for it, even if you're lucky enough to show a profit on paper. And what I mean is, it's always tied up, in the cycle of working capital. You get this job done, you got to fund the material and labor for the next job, and so forth. And so, yeah, you can have a customer that, you're making a lot of money on paper, but if they're not paying on time or paying within the terms you need, especially in our industry, I mean, it's just, that's not a customer that you want to have. I mean, when you get to a certain point, if you can afford that and it makes strategic and economical sense, that's one thing. But early on, you've really got to be diligent about having the right customers. Also, customers that will work with you through challenges, And so we had a fabulous customer that, I mean, there was obviously economic incentive for them to partner with us. I mean, they didn't do it out of the kindness of their hearts. I'm sure my cost was substantially less than the other people's costs. I had no overhead at the time, and, my labor was cheap in my mind. And so, that there was that aspect. But they walked alongside us to make sure we were successful, they were successful. I mean, we were truly partners in the project. And so that was a really critical aspect.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's carried over today. Like when you talk to a lot of the project managers at Nix, you talk to the salespeople or whatever, and how like customers are like, dude, let's do this together.
Yep.
And it is a partnership. So that's cool. I think people can take that. You had some good knowledge nuggets there where people can take away just how important it is to have the right customers and to be transparent and honest with each other and stuff like that. So now, your contract's come to the end. You hired your first salesperson. What's next? What happened next that just kept it going?
Yep. So, well, we continued to, we didn't get any more big contracts for modular buildings at the time. We continued to sprinkle more in throughout time, and we're building one in our shop today that's actually shipping to South Dakota. I mean, we've pushed that to a national product reach. We're selling them on our website now. We've got a network of people throughout the country that are selling those for us, and so it's been a great product for us. But meanwhile, Adam's hired on to sell, and really he's just looking for any fabrication projects to sell. And so we built carts and racks for automotive plants. We built components for agriculture industry. We were building storm shelters. Really we're driving that for a while, and but anything that we could make out of metal and sell, we were selling it. And we did what we had to do to keep the flywheel spinning at the time. Some of those things have continued to be core parts of our business, and some we've kind of left behind. But Adam went out, did a great job of dragging stuff back in, and I would estimate the work and draw it up, and we'd get it out in the shop, and I would deliver it, and we would just go again. And a lot of fun back. It was like the Wild West, when we were doing that. We were having a lot of fun. Meanwhile, I recognized the need to start what is our shop coatings division today, but sandblasting, painting, and powder coating. So we were doing what a lot of fabricators do. We would just, shut the shop down after hours and put plastic over the equipment and spray paint on stuff. And we also were subcontracting powder coating out, and there just wasn't a real good quality, reliable resource for us. And so we started our own powder coating and painting business, and we stood that up as a separate company under the Nix Coatings brand. We've since consolidated all that, but it still today operates on its own profit and loss statement, its own income statement, and it has its own manager. And that was really the start of the organizational structure we have today, where we have all these small businesses that operate independently under one parent company, family business. So I think that was really a turning point for us to move into more of a portfolio company as opposed to just a metal fabricator.
You hired your first salesperson, you started the shop coatings. At this point of the journey, can you remember about how many support staff you had versus
Yep.
how many skilled technicians? And it can be kind of an estimate, but do you remember that?
Yeah, I think we probably had about 8 or 10 hourly people. And we also, we were starting the coating shop, and our longest tenured hourly team member today, who just celebrated 10 years. So it's hard to imagine that was only 10 years ago. But, and we got just a little aside here. We're sending every 10-year team member now on a all expense paid, all-inclusive trip to Mexico, and got to give that to him at the Christmas party this year, which was really, really cool. So that was a fun, milestone on our journey. But we hired him in. We didn't even have the shop built yet. And so hired our first painter today. He's a foreman for us. And he helped us finish the shop, And so we just had to bootstrap stuff. I saw a good, talented person who I knew that I wanted to get in the organization. We weren't really ready for him yet. Convinced him to come to work for us as our head painter. But he helped us build the paint shop and finish the thing before we were even ready to paint in it. And then that business allowed us to bring on our first manager, which was Brian Merkley, who's also part of our executive team now, and a partner in the business, and one of our vice president of operations. So that journey through launching the coatings business started to, begin the evolution of what is now our management team or our executive team.
You started that shop coatings. You hired Brian. And it's still going up, right? Like the company is still going up. What was the next big priority that maybe people can take away, that you realized that we have to get this done in order to keep it rolling?
To keep the trajectory going that we were on, I knew we needed to really build a rock solid team, and we had people at the time, but we didn't have some needed to be part of that team and some didn't. A really cohesive team that could take us to the next level. And I want to back up to the part of the story where, Adam sort of smacked me upside the head and said, we're not going to lower our standards. We're going to have good people, and that obviously didn't happen overnight. But I think, the point I want to make on that is when you're trying to grow, parting ways with people can be counterintuitive, and maybe being more selective about who we had might not have allowed us to grow as much at that moment in time, but there's absolutely no way in hell we would grow 100x without those decisions we made. So it's almost, the thing about, taking one step back to take 2 steps forward, and in this case, it was like 1 step back to take 100 steps forward. But if we didn't get really diligent about the kind of people we wanted to surround ourselves with, there's no way Adam Schmidt sticks around. There's no way Brian Merkley leaves a Fortune 500 company to join our company. And the people that we're attracting today, there's no way that happens if we didn't make that decision back then to have quality people that fit our culture and our values. And so, sometimes I would just tell you that, it might feel like you're going backwards, but, down the road, that will be an exponentially greater decision down the road.
I want to wrap up, but I just, me, I like to talk. And so, that was kind of going back to when you said you hired, longest tenured employee, and he won an award a year or so ago, I remember. And one of the things that you had talked about was that he kind of fits your ideal employee, team member. I say employee, team member.
Yep.
And I think that was a good example of when you draw that line and you do get the right people, they stay 10 years.
Yep.
So that's just a little side story.
And knowing what does a good team member look like, and having, we have some of those people hanging on the wall like a hero. You call it a hero image, but really showing this is what a great team member looks like. This is what it looks like at work. This is what they look like outside of work. He's a great husband. He's a great dad. He helps coach the ball team, and he's a respected part of the community, and also the customers love him too. It's not enough to say these are the kind of people we don't want. You need to say that's what great looks like, and that's what we want.
That's awesome. So I think that's a great teaser to the next episode, which I think may be a whole episode just about this, on the 100X journey, is building that all-star team, especially building the foundation of the team that you still have a lot of them here today, but also even, that helps you identify those people. And I want to talk about that in the next episode. So stick around for the next episode of the ProFab Alliance podcast, here talking with Matthew Nix, co-founder of ProFab Alliance, about coming up with the ideal team member and building a great team out, and how that benefited the launch into this 100X growth. So.
Yep, thanks, Casey.